Hi, my name is Autumn Monahan. I work with the City of Issaquah's communications team, and I'm here today with Mayor Mary Lou Pauly, who is just hours away from presenting her proposed 25-26 budget. Thanks so much for being here today.
Thank you.
I'm hoping we can chat a bit about what your plans are for the next 2 years, and then also some challenges that the city is facing in this second biennial budget that you've proposed. This is the second year now
This is
or
the
second
second
time.
we've done it.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, Autumn. It
Yeah.
is nice to be here. This is a different format for us, and I'm really excited that we can provide the community with some information through a podcast versus having them come to our meeting or read a very lengthy agenda package. I feel very strongly that it is important to have communities, businesses, and residents get involved in the budgeting process, but it's really difficult. City budgets are set up differently than regular budgets. There are a lot of complexities that don't occur. So even if you're a businessman, the way we do our budgeting is difficult to understand. And it's hard to engage when you don't understand.
Right.
So I'm hoping today that maybe I can talk at a high level, little less wonky, no acronyms, and just see if I can get some general themes and messages out there.
So to start, as you're building a proposed budget, how much of this is flexible? How much control do you really have in building it versus how much is restrictive? You kind of hinted at it already. It's different than a business or perhaps a household budget. So
it's very different. When I got on council 11 years ago, it takes a good cycle or two, even for a council member who's spending a lot of time on it, to understand. But we have mandates that cities need to prioritize. These are must-do things, and the two things under the state legislature are public safety.
Yep.
And for us, that's a mix of police and fire, outreach, our justice system, and having a city clerk, even if it's a part-time city clerk. Other than that, there is a lot of discretion where community members can work with their councils and their government to decide what other community services and service level expectations do they have. So our community wants to make sure that we have paved roads, walkable sidewalks, usable outdoor spaces in town, parks and recreation program, garbage pickup.
Right.
And when you put all of that together, those programs take up the majority of the budget. Not a lot of wiggle room in what to do differently, what not to do. And so what is left over after that is a pretty small pot of money. And that's where council can spend some time talking about what other community investments are they hearing that the community would like to have. And that pot of money, the discretionary amount of what we would call our operating account, our general fund, has been decreasing over time. One of the reasons for the decrease is, and I'm sure we'll talk about it later, just the difference between the amount of revenues that the city is collecting and how our expenses are growing.
It was interesting for me to really think about the budget that way when you were kind of preparing some of your thoughts to go with the proposed budget that you're delivering tonight. That yes, there's some state requirements, and then there's just really a level of expectation of our community of services that just happen. Right? That just happen as a resident or as a business. The roads are paved, or there's areas like parks that are maintained. And that's an expectation.
Right.
That's already in the budget, right? And so when you get down to it, that small amount, it is really small compared to everything else the city just does as a day-to-day.
Correct.
So let's boil it down to, we've talked about a city budget. When I think about budgeting, mostly I think about my household budget. So what are kind of some similarities or differences if you're comparing to maybe budgets that we're more used to?
Yeah, great question. One of the analogies I like to use about the current financial situation we're in is that for a very long time, our expenses have been growing at a rate that is higher than the great rate of growth of revenue in the city. So the wonky term is structural deficit. But if I'm just thinking about it in my own household, if I have an income that affords us to live in a certain way and pay for our daycare and our car and our insurance and our food and the daily things we need to have, and those expenses rise faster than my salary, I'm actually spending down. I'm getting myself into a difficult situation. We would call that a structural deficit. Something has to change. So as a homeowner or a house owner, or sorry, just as a person living in the community, I could decide to get a part-time job. And in addition to my job, which would give me additional revenue that hopefully will keep up with those increased expenses. So that's the same in the city. Now that the gap between those increases is really showing up starkly, we need to have a new revenue source, and we do not. Or we need a state level increase in revenues that the state gives us, which we do not get. And so therefore, the part that is the hardest for me in this 2-year budget, both professionally and personally, is then you have to look at your expenses. And we're at a place where we actually had to do layoffs this year. And that is a really difficult place to find. That it means an ongoing reduction in employee and in services over a long period of time unless we address the structural deficit. So a big focus of my message to council and to the community is that we need to be making sure that we are having those agencies that provide us services or funding increase what they are doing and find a new revenue stream that we can continue to pay for services. Or the reality is we're in a declining situation. So you don't see that sort of stark message in a brief budget summary, but we are not the only city in the state that is facing this. We're just one of the first to experience it in such a significant way.
So how does your proposed budget balance out? So what are some proposed reductions in expenses?
Thank you for that question, Autumn. In order to develop a balanced budget, and cities must develop a balanced budget, all departments, excluding those that are in public safety, provided recommendations for reductions at 12% over last year. And I couldn't be prouder of our city team. They were very thoughtful. This is a really difficult conversation. And you have to balance that with how can we maintain the highest levels of service possible for our community. So in this particular budget, we have reduced professional service costs, which is those costs we pay to consultants to complete studies for us. And we do have professional staff and we can bring that work in-house. It just means that due to the size of the professional staff, it's just going to take longer to get the same amount of work done. So the kinds of studies were planning studies, traffic control for construction projects. And that gives us what we call a one-time break, meaning we can only cut it once. Once it's gone, we can't cut it the next year because it's not in there. We use some one-time ending fund balance. An ending fund balance, the city's got multiple different funds, including the one that I call the operating fund or the general fund. And at the end of each year, there's an ending fund balance in each of those. And that carries over to the next year and provides a cushion if in the event of an emergency or an unexpected expenditure that you have to have. Some of those are being spent down this year. And again, that's just a one-time fix. Once we've spent it down, it's not there and we can't spend it down again. So it doesn't go very far at all in helping us address that deficit I talked about. And we've also decided to delay or reduce capital projects. This is the one that's probably also very frustrating for me. After being able to make some significant investments due to some one-time funding we got from the federal government, people started to see a lot of work out in the community this year. And that's great. That was exciting. We don't have the funding to continue that. So I'm glad that we were able to use that one-time federal funding to do it, but there isn't an ongoing revenue stream. So people will notice that capital projects are flowing out slower. And capital projects can be anything from replacing a turf field to replacing some concrete, redoing an intersection. We saw a lot of that this year. And the other was reducing or reassigning staff. So the budget included 18 positions that were eliminated, 7 of which were vacant, but 11 were people who are doing a really good job, providing great service that we can't afford at this point in time. And so that was a extremely difficult part of this budget process.
Well, and not to use the wonky term again of structural deficit, but
very wonky.
It is, but as you were talking about, some of the proposed cuts are one time.
Right.
It got us to a place that will have a balanced budget. Some are ongoing. So layoffs, that's an ongoing
That's
cost,
an ongoing cost,
right?
yeah.
And so there's a mix of those two.
Right.
And so as part of that, I mean, this structural deficit hasn't gone away, right?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
So there's still, there's more decisions that I think need to be made in the future, right? As far as how we get, 2 years down the road, what's next. And so what are some other options around finding revenue, or what are some of the concerns or kind of, challenges that you have as far as bringing more money in to meet those community expectations?
Well, first I just want to make a little comment about what you just said versus capital versus ongoing. And that's like your checking account and your savings account when you're at home. And the cuts to the savings account only help you in the current year. And so you are not really addressing this disparity between the different increases in your expenditures and revenues. The ongoing costs of programs and employee positions, that is where you can address your structural deficit, but we have not, the cuts that were proposed in this particular 2-year budget, painful as they are, do not close the gap. And so we need an ongoing revenue source to help us close the gap. One of the things I've been working on the last probably 4 to 6 years at the state legislature was to really talk about how state shared revenues in several areas could be used to assist cities with our ongoing expenditures, particularly in public safety, which is a huge portion of our budget. So we had something, another wonky word, streamlined sales tax. What did that mean? So streamlined sales tax was a change that happened, maybe I'm going to throw a number out there, I'm probably wrong, like 6 to 10 years ago, where cities who had warehouses, cities who had regional shopping centers, do have expenditures in order to host those types of businesses. We have to build stronger pavements to support the bigger trucks. And so the sales tax system allowed for, Kent's a great example of it, for Kent's warehousing district, that's where the sales tax on something that was sold would be collected. That allowed Kent to reinvest in their road system. The law was changed such that cities could get more sales tax revenue even if they didn't have warehousing. And the idea was that that would give those cities additional revenue. What happened in Issaquah was we lost revenue. So I'm not sure exactly the dollar value, but we lost revenue, and Kent, a significant warehouse district, it took $12 million a year out of their budget that they used for operations and maintenance.
Wow.
That is an insurmountable loss. There was several years of transition payments to kind of help buffer it, but it's gone. And in Issaquah, it's the same. We're not a significant warehousing district, but we were collecting more sales tax prior to that change. So that's had an impact on Issaquah, as well as the state cap on property tax. And there are some other revenues that the state shares with us that are alcohol, marijuana, and I'm blanking on some other ones, retail excise, real estate excise tax, which is the tax when you sell your property. And the amount that cities could be getting back from those shared revenues is not what we expected. So they are shared to a degree, but not to the degree that cities were told when those were put into place. And that is a major source of new revenue, especially, some cities want it targeted for public safety, others just need general revenue. Issaquah could definitely target that for public safety. So, if we were to get more revenue with strings attached to it, to our number one mandated city priority of public safety, woohoo, that's a win. And I'm saying that to you here today, Autumn, as I am to my council members and communities, because we have to ask the state to step up more. We have really been hamstrung, and now we're at the point of deciding where services can be reduced, where programs can be cut, and not just in this 2-year budget, but in the two-year budget coming after that, and the 2-year budget coming after that. If there is no new revenue source provided to cities, we'll become public safety departments, basically. Utilities and public safeties, and everything else that isn't mandated, we won't be able to afford.
Well, that segues to my next question, which you covered a bit of what your proposed reductions in expenses are for the next 2 years. How will the community feel that? What are some programs that are a bit more visible that we may, really feel or live?
Well, I think Parks and Recreation comes up for sure. that is a much beloved but not required program.
Mm-hmm.
And so just in the way we might maintain our fields, you may see more browning out of grass at different times. So just a slight service delivery cut in that area, but it will be noticeable. One of the things I get a lot of email about is, if there's a problem or just a comment about how beautiful our parks are. I think that investment is super important, but it is not one we are mandated to do. A couple of other, I'll talk about something that's a little different. We have been using some funding, one-time funding, to do a couple of pilots in town. And different sectors of our community have benefited from these pilots, and it is disappointing that both pilots will not be carrying on. So the first one I'll talk about is Metroflex. King County has a program where a city can make an investment in a micro transit program. And so Talus and Squack Mountain were recently added to this program. I think we're almost ready to get a year's worth of data on it. Many, many folks use that program. Mm-hmm. It's a success, but it was also a proof of concept to show Metro that the ridership is there. Issaquah's portion that they contribute to that is just under $400,000 on an annual basis, and that is not sustainable. This pilot project was meant to show Metro that we would make the investment to show that the ridership was there so that they can expand their service. We were never going to get into the transit business ourselves. So that is not in the current budget. The funding was removed, the position was eliminated. It was one of the positions I talked about. And that's going to cause a lot of heartache for those people over the last year who tried it out, and it worked for them. It was a way for them to get around town easier. One of the other programs was an outreach program that we had. We partnered with a local motel. We found a way to help people who are trying to exit homelessness have a sheltered place to stay while things got worked out, issues got addressed, connections were made to social services. That program was amazingly successful. It really helped people. There's some fantastic data on our website to show how you can move people out of homelessness. That pilot project was meant to demonstrate to the King County Regional Housing Authority that is the kind of nuanced approach that would work in Issaquah and likely in the cities to the east of us as well. So proof of concept, yes, it works. Ongoing funding, partnership, we don't have it. And my hope is that as a mayor and council, our job is to make sure Metro and King County Homelessness Regional Authority know what works here and to have them bring their services here. There's always been a disparity in regional services. The investment that the Issaquah community makes, the business community and residents, in these programs is not returned in equal measure. And so both of these were examples of things that are quite painful to remove and will be noticed by two different groups within our community. But, we have to get our partners to help. We have to get the county, we have to get the state, we have to find a new revenue source.
And I know this in working for you and see that what your day-to-day looks like, but so much of your work is at the state level, is at the county
Very
level
so.
For those reasons, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, part of our job is definitely to be fiscally responsible to this community and this budget and, in the $200 million range. Yes, the other part is what we do outside of the building, and I take that part extremely seriously. We are impacted by regional planning policies, by Metro expansion or contraction decisions, by where King County Regional Homelessness will make an investment or not make an investment, and how the state shares revenues. So yeah, I would say a good 30% of the work that I do is outside of the building.
So you said that, we've talked a bit about some of the proposed cuts. So what is in the budget? And I think, to start, public safety. So what are some of the enhancements or investments that are being made in public safety?
I am so proud of the staff team that has worked on this. Chief Schwan and her team have worked really hard to make sure that we are providing public safety in the way that meets the community's expectations. So we are not making any cuts in the public safety program. We actually are getting to the place, contrary to many other communities, where we are fully staffed and able to provide the service level that's expected. That's not common in our area for multiple reasons, whether it's been just a difficult career choice for police officers over the last 4 years, or there is a lack of police officers coming out of the academy, or cities don't have the funding to fill all the positions that the council's already approved for them. So we're not in that situation. I'm very proud of that. It's unusual for a city of our size with so many larger urban cities next to us to have a court, a jail, a police department, a fire department. I mean, that is really different. It makes us unique, and it allows us also to provide those services at a reasonable fee to our neighbors to the east, so that they geographically have facilities that are closer to their communities and are at an economical cost to their communities as well. So we are not making any cuts there because this is our number one thing, public safety.
So I don't know how many know, but we also operate a municipal court. And as you talk about providing services to others to the east, like Snoqualmie, North Bend, they also contract with us for court services.
Right.
And so what is also in the proposed budget as far as next steps for our municipal court? They currently are located at City Hall South, which is across the street from City Hall. But the City Council has been talking a lot about kind of what's next for our court.
Yes. There's always a decision for a city like ours to decide whether or not to be in the court business. And I believe councils in prior years have found the value added by having it within your community. And so the investments that are being made are coming from a couple of different places. There is a King County courthouse that is underused, that is set up as a courthouse over across from the Pickering Barn, that our court will be moving to. And so this is the first time that they will actually be doing the great work that they do within a facility that is designed for court work. So I'm super excited about that. One of their programs that I've been so amazed about is the community court program, which you could call a diversion program, but it's something that allows people who come in contact with the justice system and who want to change the patterns that are happening in their life, to be able to do that without being incarcerated. And that's fantastic. It's also expensive and getting more expensive. There are some state level changes that we are factoring into our budget for the costs of public defense. And so there are investments actually being made in the court and increased investments being made in the court in order to make sure that we comply with the requirements out of the state level. So that is an area that is seeing some growth actually in investment in order for it to continue to function. And that's challenging. It's challenging in that we need to do it, but we know that because our revenues aren't growing, we need to do that and we need to cut somewhere else.
Right.
So tough decisions.
And, another part of public safety is also fire and emergency services. So while you mentioned that we are very much a full service city, we provide court, we provide jail, we have our own police, we have our own 911 dispatch system. We do not provide directly fire and emergency services.
Right.
We contract with Eastside Fire and Rescue. And that's also a large part of our budget too, right?
Yes, a very large part. Yes, we've participated with Eastside Fire and Rescue for 20 plus years. I should know the numbers. Probably 25. I'm going to guess 25. And that is 2 fire districts and 3 cities. And their costs are also rising. And so we do include that in our budget. You will see a line item that is for Eastside Fire and Rescue. It is growing much faster rate, expenditure-wise, than our revenues can afford. So we do have to have some conversations there as well about how will we, as a growing region, be able to continue funding the fire services the way they need to be fired. It was a big challenge this year. Some of the increases coming out for some of the cities was in the 20 plus range year over year.
Wow.
That is really difficult to figure out how to do when the revenues are growing at 2-3%. So we have some tough conversations coming. We have a couple of council members who sit on that board. And in particular, I just have to give a shout out to Councilmember Hall. His work during this budget cycle, Eastside Fire and Rescue, was really challenging, and he did a really great job. But we're going to have the same conversation in the next 2 years. And so again, what is happening at that agency is the same thing that's happening with us internally with our public safety portion, which police, fire, and jail. These are challenging times. I have talked with the fire chief before about us approaching jointly cities and the fire agency to the state to talk about shared revenues that are targeted for public safety. And so hopefully we can get to that place where we are able to find a new revenue source that actually works for both the fire agency and the city public safety services that we provide as well.
So, I think a lot of this, our community will just say, oh, this just happens, like public safety or like the maintenance of parks, right? And I know one of the biggest priorities in our community is transportation, right? And tackling traffic in different ways. So you mentioned that, what's happening with the proposed budget and the MetroFlex program. What is in our proposed budget around transportation? And I know we have some dedicated revenues now, starting, I think it was last year, right, that the council adopted. So what are some of those investments?
Well, I think one thing I want to talk about, Autumn, is our Transportation Benefit District. And that is an overlay, a taxing overlay, that allows the council to collect funding that is dedicated to transportation. So even though it is a difficult budget year in many, many ways, that new revenue has been helpful. It will generate about $1.2 million a year on an ongoing basis, which will allow us to, we have reduced investments a little bit in transportation, but not as much as people might have thought or worried about. So that was a council decision that was made a while ago. They put in place the tool to do that, and then I believe it was last budget cycle that they decided to use that tool. And that is a percentage of sales tax that's collected at the retail level comes back into Issaquah for transportation projects. That's kind of, along what I'm hoping to do with the state on finding another revenue source is to look at something that's already collected and to find a way to have more of that return back to the community. So very proud of that. I mean, this year driving around, walking around, biking around Issaquah, it was like a historic year of visible improvements in pavement and sidewalks and access ramps and all of that. So even though we're making some cuts, we are still going to be at the higher than the pre-pandemic level of investment. Due to some of the one-time funding that we got from the federal government, we were able to boost our investment. But even if we're cutting, we're still higher than we were before the pandemic. So that makes me feel comfortable because transportation and the maintenance of our system is so important to the community.
It is. It sure was visible. My goodness. We heard
very
so much from the
visible.
community and just how appreciative they were. So I'm glad that those resources were used when we had them in the moment, right? And now that there is still some ongoing investment that's happening
just not at the level we've experienced the last 3 years,
right.
But it is ongoing, and that is very helpful.
Right. So another community priority is sustainability. And I think that's one area you talk about, right? There's certain things that are mandated and certain that are very much priorities of our community. And so, I know that we have our own dedicated sustainability fund, and some of that is funded through our contract for waste management, right? So what are some proposed expenditures or some things that we'll be looking forward to as far as sustainability in the next 2 years?
Yeah, and even the word sustainability, I meet some community members who ask me to define that every once in a while.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a way for us as a community to live in the environment and leave a positive footprint versus a negative footprint. What are all the different things that we can do to minimize our impacts? And Issaquah, two previous mayors, Mayor Freisinger, I believe, is the one who might probably set this group up. It's a unusual thing for cities of our size to have, and it's a group of staff that is dedicated to looking at city actions and city programs and finding out how we can make ourselves more efficient, less greenhouse gas emitters, but also to fund some things in the community to help homeowners and businesses do it as well. So the state has pushed out some energy efficiency standards that buildings of a certain size have to become more efficient. We've found ways to help people do the audits of their commercial facilities to figure out where they can make the necessary investments, improvements. We're really looking at electrification incentives, and so we have several programs out there that can help homeowners and businesses to be able to do that. We're also looking at our own city fleet. We have a pretty significant city fleet since we self-perform so much work. And moving that towards an electrified fleet is a goal that came about through the community's climate action plan that they have, and is something we can make an investment in. One thing that really surprised me is we did have an audit through a Lead for Government program that certification program that looked at where our strengths and weaknesses are. And I was really surprised to find out that one of the biggest areas for improvement for us could be in our solid waste diversion and our food waste prevention initiatives. I thought we were doing pretty well. And then when we got audited, it's like, you know what? That is a huge place that we can make improvements in the community. So having that audit to find that out, and then being able to work with our staff to talk about how we're going to do that, that's been very enlightening for me, and I'm really glad that that is still in there. We also are looking at, as you know, because you're in charge of community facilities, we want to make sure that we're looking at resiliency as we talk about sustainability. Can we get through a power failure, a flood, an earthquake, an incident, and be able to come out the other side being able to still provide some level of emergency service support? And so I'm really glad that you and your team have been able to look at our facilities and make some assessments. And we have a lot of work to do in order to bring some of these properties and buildings up to what they need to be. But that is a huge part of being a sustainable community, is planning for resiliency. So I'm really glad that that is still in the budget as well.
So tonight you're going to present the proposed budget to the City Council. What does the budget season look like? Or so what's next, and how can the community get involved?
Thanks. Tonight there'll be a committee of the whole starting at 6:30, and there will be a presentation. I will do a bit of a preamble and introduce staff. We're going to have Deputy City Administrator carry the show tonight with the different departments. This is really about council receiving the budget. Okay. Budgets are complicated documents. They generate a lot of questions, and so we may be getting some council questions this evening. We may be getting some sort of bookmark or footnotes where a council member may be throwing something out on the table like, this is an area I want to have more conversation. I haven't figured out what my questions are yet, but I'm concerned about this, or I like that. So it's not a significant working session. It's more sort of an introduction to where everybody's head is at as we're starting this process. But then we do a deeper dive. Their comments, their questions are all collected. Answers are created and provided back at the next meeting that's going to happen. There'll be a discussion tonight of what the budget meeting schedule looks like. And that question and answer document will just grow as they continue their deliberations. Council also has the option to look at the proposed budget, look at the cuts, and look at the adds, and consider doing something else. And so that is the part where a community member or resident or business owner who's concerned about something has an opportunity to weigh in and say, you know, why they believe a budget adjustment should be made by the council. In the end, everything has to be balanced. So it's not as simple as just saying, I'd like to put something back in, because something else has to come back out. So it'll be an interesting conversation. It will evolve over right through until I think the first Monday in December. And it's just a really detailed process. So council will have to work together on how they're going to reconcile or edit the budget before their final vote.
Wow. So all of these meetings are public, and they're televised on ICTV or through YouTube. You can email your city council directly if you have feedback, or I'm sure, as well, to provide any feedback or have any ideas. You also can learn more at issaquahwa.gov/budget. And with that, thank you so much, Mayor Pauly, for sitting down. This is a very busy day, I know, for you, as you're working to present the budget to the City Council. So thanks for your time, and good luck this budget season.
Thank you very much. And thank you for allowing this information to get out to the community in a different way. Like I said, we can be so wonky and so full of jargon. It's kind of easier for me just to sit across from you and talk through the budget like this. So thank you for doing this.
Great, thanks.